Beacon Brother Motion Picture Productions. This is an open casting call, and we need some volunteers, some actors and actresses who will help us out this morning. I don't know where Trevor gets these hats. I think he keeps them in his car. But we need 4 actors and actresses. Dennis, excellent. Thank you for volunteering. I appreciate that. That is great. And Brian, thank you. I love that. Thank you so much. That was a quick hand up. So come on up. We need 2 additional actors or actresses to help us out. Excellent. Thank you so much. Come on up. Let's just point randomly. Oh, sure. Absolutely. That's great. Excellent. Very, very nice. And we need one more. If you came here with a drama queen or king, just point to them and we'll know. And we'll know. Are you really pointing? You want to volunteer? Alex, excellent. Thank you so much. I love it. So they're all talking. All right, so let's get our positions here gathered up. We're gonna put you here. You're gonna be our security. You're gonna have to look you're gonna have to put that right on. Yep. This is gonna be so you look official. Now you're gonna look official. Excellent. All right, we're going to let's see here. Let's see, which of you is most like God? All right. Let's see, we have an Ezekiel and we have a Jacob. Those are very good Hebrew names. Let's see, who should be who? It's really hard to tell. You're not really sure which looks like more like an Ezekiel. But I think what we'll do, I think that you, in fact, will end up as Zeke. There you go. Whoops, sorry about that. And you will end up as Jake, and this is for you, which really did come out of my closet. And believe it or not, it's not just a prop in this. Oh, excellent. There you go. Very, very nice. All right, so let's get you in some positions here. We're going to you can open up in the meantime in our script to Matthew. That's the rest of you there. And we're at Act 18, line 23. So we're going to have the security you're the security servant. You're going to be over here looking very securitorial. Excellent. There you go. Fantastic. And Jake, you're off in the wings for now. Zeke, you're going to stand right over here. And the king, the master, will sit on the throne. And we'll turn, this is a throne. This is a big royal regal chair. There you go. Excellent. The scene is set and we are finding ourselves in the throne room. So I think we might very well be ready for action. All right. So I'll also be narrating as we go along. You don't look at the narrator though. Yes, absolutely. That was good. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. Look like you're thinking. Excellent, excellent. As he began the settlement, a man, that's going to be Zeke, who owed him 10,000 bags of gold. Now, you've got to understand, Zeke, 10,000 bags of gold is an impossibly high number for you. So there's a certain amount of panic that you're going to have when going before the king. It's impossible because a day rate for a blue-collar worker was about a denarius. And so this amount of money is like 60 million of those. So this is an impossibly large number. And so a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold, was brought to him by the security. Excellent. Very, very nice. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered, that's you, that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. No, we'll keep that one. We'll go get them later. So you're going to command that they're going to be sold sold to repay their debt. Now, go ahead. Go ahead, sold, and then you start dragging them off secure. All right, now wait, stop. Zeke, you're not done yet. You want another shot at this. And so you realize that, of course, that a slave can only be sold for about 1,000 denarii, which means you'll never be able to repay this debt. So you only have one course of action. Now, the servant fell on his knees before him, before his master. Yes, there you go. Fell on his knees, and then you beg.
Please.
You say, be patient with me.
Be patient with me.
And I will pay back everything.
And I will pay back everything.
The servant's master, he took pity on him. Give me your best pity. Sell it. That's not quite pity. Pity. Oh, you are, grab your entrails, your stomach. Oh, you have pity. And you cancel the debt and you let him go.
Let it be canceled. You can go. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So Zeke, you go off. End of Act 1. We have to do a quick scene change for Act 2. Grab your throne, put it over here. You go over there. You're off scene a little bit. We're now in the village. And Zeke, you're going to be taking the place of the king over here. Jake, you're just looking kind of, you're going to walk this way a little bit, and you're going to switch sides with the security servant. All right, now we're about ready. Now, you're sort of, standing around, when the scene is about to start. You're in the village and ready. Action. That's right. All right. But when the servant, I'm not here. I'm not really. But when that servant went out, that's you, he found one of his fellow servants. Look like you found him. There you go. You can start to go. Who owed him 100 silver coins. Now that's about what a man could earn in a few months' time. So he owes you what could be paid back. And so when you see him, you grab him and you begin to choke him. Pay back what you owe me. Pay back what you owe me. Pay back what you owe me. All right. Jake, you fall to your knees and you beg him, be patient with me.
Please be patient with me.
And I will pay you back.
I'll pay you back.
Zeke, you refuse.
No way.
I'm doing
Give me the money.
You got to give me your best harsh, your stern, your no way. Give me your money. Give me the money.
Give me the money now.
Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he can pay the debt.
Oh, please, I'm broke. I'll take a loan. Anyway.
You got it. You're in prison. End of Act 2. All right, let's reposition for Act 3. The king is back in the throne room. And let's get your security. You're standing right here because you've still got to be able to keep an eye on what just happened. And you're kind of off looking smug. You got to work this. You have to. If I don't believe it, no one's going to believe it. Smug. Okay. Give us your best smug. Now, when the other servant, we're back to our security servant, saw what happened, they were outraged. Outraged. Yes. And when they told their master everything that had happened,
He went on over there. He owed him money and he had him thrown in jail. You forgave him for his debt.
then the master called the servant in.
Bring him in.
Your lines, go. Oh, wait, I got to tell him to you. You wicked servant.
You're a wicked servant.
I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to.
Cancel all of that debt of yours because you begged me.
Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? Shouldn't you have had Shouldn't you have had mercy
Shouldn't you have mercy
on your fellow servant
on your fellow servant
just as I had on you?
as I had on you?
Pregnant pause. Graphic. Cue graphic. Difference between the gold and the silver. In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. And in our telling of the story, we're going to let Jake out. And let's give them a round of applause. You guys were great. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. I knew there were some drama kings and queens here. Excellent. All right, so in the retelling of this great story, we come to this place where we see that God has forgiven us, shown us great mercy, and forgave a debt that we could, in fact, never repay. We see in verse 27, if you're still open in your script there, the servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. You see, that was the motivator here. That's what it was. It was the pity that the king felt. Now, this word is an intriguing word to me. It is similar in ways to how we refer to the heart. So it was viewed, it's the gut, it's the entrails for the ancients. It's this part. It's where you feel the emotion. See, if you feel something up here, it means you have to get aspirin into the hospital really, really quick, right? You're feeling it here. When something takes place around you and you feel it deep in your gut, this is where the idea of pity comes from. The same word, when it's in the feminine, it refers to the womb. So it's that place of tenderness. It's that place of compassion. And it's the place that can move you to great action. So I went through the scriptures, and I found a whole lot of other places where this word showed up. And what I found fascinating was how rarely it shows up in reference to us. It does occasionally, but most often it's used to describe God's reaction to us, or better, to our plight, to the misery that's around us. I want to just run very, very rapidly through a bunch of them. Matthew 9:36, the crowds are following Jesus, and he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless. When he sees people harassed and helpless, that word compassion, same word. He had pity. He was moved with compassion. Chapter 14, verse 14. Well, this is the feeding of the 5,000. They landed, they saw a large crowd. He had compassion on them. He healed their sick. 15:32. It's the feeding of the 4,000. Jesus called his disciples on them. He said, I have compassion on these people. They've already been with me 3 days. They have nothing to eat. So he feeds them, the whole crowd. We have the verse 18:27, which is the one that we just read. That's our passage, the king and the servant. Chapter 20, verse 34. Jesus had compassion on them. He's speaking about the blind. He touched their eyes, and immediately they received their sight. He heals them because of his compassion. Mark 1:41. A man with leprosy, not someone you would readily touch. Jesus was indignant. He reached out his hand and he touched the man. I am willing, he said, be clean. Immediately the leprosy left him. He was cleansed. Jesus sent him away at once with a strong warning. So he tells him, this is the leper who desperately needs a healing touch, but who would ever want to give it to a leper? Jesus, because he was moved with compassion, indignant at the misery of the man around him, the men around him. Luke 7, a widow in anguish because her son died. When the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, don't cry. Then he went up and touched the bear where they were carrying him on, and the bearers stood still. He said, young man, I say to you, get up. The dead man sat up and began to talk, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. One of the great parables, this parable of the Good Samaritan in Luke chapter 10. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity. He was moved to help him, and he spent his time, his money, his resources at great personal expense and risk to help him. And then Luke 15, another great parable, the prodigal son. So he got up and went to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. He had been so wronged by his son, and yet none of that mattered now, because in the presence of the misery of others, something reached deep into him and pulled out this compassion. See, when we talk about it, pity, it's something that we have on another. It's sort of like something that we do for them. See, it reaches into you and it pulls compassion out of you. See, it's something that you just feel it and it's deep, and because of that, you have to act. That's kind of the idea we get as we look through these scriptures. It's as if in the face of human misery, we were taken by pity. We were taken by compassion and then hurled into an opportunity or a path of alleviating the misery. So, of course, this, as we see it, how it's used in our parable, is what happened to the king. He was seized by this compassion because this number, 10,000, it's an impossibly large number. I told you in another week that a lot of the parables use hyperbole. And so this is a great example of that. When his audience would have heard the massive amount of gold that this guy owed, now maybe this servant oversaw a vast country and he was responsible for all of the tax collecting over a giant piece of real estate, a country-size piece of real estate. Maybe that's the case, and maybe he squandered it all. Either way, he is hopelessly in debt. Hopelessly in debt. There's nothing he is going to be able to do. And everyone in that who would have been hearing this would have been like, really? Because what did he say? Just give me some time, I'll pay it back. And I think everyone would have groaned in the room. They would have been like, no, you're not. You're talking about billions. You're never going to repay that. It's not going to happen. There's only one way for this to resolve without Zeke paying for it. It has to come from the compassion of the king, which is, of course, what we saw. And this is, I think, designed to help us understand what God has done for us. See, each of us realizes that we have in some way not lived up to our full potential. That in some way we have not been or done what God wanted from us. But rarely do we understand the significance of our debt. Rarely do we realize that it isn't a few $100 we owe. See, what we try to do is we try to find out a way to repay this debt that we owe to God. So for our rebellion and our resistance, for our refusal to follow him and serve him with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength, we say, well, you know what, I'll do a couple of good deeds. I'll work a little bit harder. I'll be a better person. And as long as I'm a good person, as long as I do a couple good things, well, it'll balance out. It's as if he's saying, guys, it's billions in debt. You're never going to repay it. First, we have to come to terms with understanding just how far in debt we really are to God, so that we can realize that if God doesn't forgive, that we have no hope, that we will, if we insist on paying, we will end up in a spiritual prison forever. Forever. So instead, we receive his forgiveness. And because of that, we ought to show forgiveness. Of course, this was the main point of our parable. But we often respond with our own but. That's what happened in verse 28, right? You'll see that there. But when the servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. "Pay me back what you owe me," he demanded. You know, the idea of them being fellow servants, there should have been sympathy. There should have been compassion. There should have been a connection. This would have been an easy thing after what you've just experienced. But this servant says, but, because there's always a way to make an excuse so that we don't have to do what we ought to do. But he's been given another chance. Look at verse 29. His fellow servant does the same exact thing. He falls to his knees and he begs him, be patient. So yes, he's already resisting what he ought to do, but now he's got a moment. He's got someone saying, please, please have mercy, please. Show forgiveness. Be patient and I will pay it back. What does he say in 30? But he refused. There's a tiny little word. So unbelievably insightful for how we often live in this world. We're presented with these opportunities to do what we ought to do, but we refuse. We went off, throw them in. Now, I know we all like these big buts. I cannot lie. Sometimes though, it seems to me like we seek forgiveness. We want it from God, but we haven't really wrestled with the depth of our depravity. We haven't wrestled with just how far gone we really are, how much we really do owe. And so we experience his forgiveness and we don't count it as much. So much so that we're unwilling to give it to others. By comparison, what has been done to us and what has been owed to us pales in comparison to what has been given to us by God. As we seek his forgiveness and we see it manifest on the cross of Christ. And so a judgment ends up awaiting those who refuse to be transformed by God's forgiveness. Think about that for just a moment. We find God here, the God figure in the story, getting angry when his children are cruel and refuse to forgive. That's what we see happening. Look at verse 34. In anger, speaking of the king, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. Now, just a comment here on interpreting parables, because remember, this isn't a exceptionally detailed theological treatise like you might find in Romans. This is a short story trying to get a couple of major points out to us. And the reason I say that is because each week we have to understand a little bit better about interpreting parables. Otherwise, we're going to make these things do stuff that they're not supposed to do. It's clear that the figure, the king figure, is God. But that doesn't mean that everything that figure does has to be directly lined up with what God would do in the same situation. The reason I say that is because now you could come to the conclusion that in fact God is going to take away your gift of forgiveness if you refuse to forgive. And I don't think that's what this parable is teaching at all. This isn't a parable about eternal security or losing salvation or anything like that. This is a parable about the natural, the inevitable result of experiencing the forgiveness of God and what it ought to do in the hearts of those who have genuinely experienced it. You don't want to push a parable too far. That's where all the craziness starts to happen. You don't need everything to line up with everything directly. These are still stories meant to teach a bigger truth. And so if you push them too far, you'll start to go off into like crazy little deep end kinds of stuff about these. So you want to take as much of the intention out of it as you can without pressing it too far. Because, the reversal of the king causes us a great deal of distress. He changed his mind. He no longer offered the forgiveness. And so many of us look at that and we go, oh no, this is terrible, terrible news. But we don't want to miss what Jesus is trying to communicate to us, because he hits it again. And look at verse 35. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from the heart. He wants us to feel the weight of this. He's trying to let it set just firmly on our shoulders. So we say, wow, what's going on? Why is it that my heart is so hard? How come I've struggled so long to release the debt that is owed to me? He wants us to use this to examine our hearts. I think this is really important for us because, we get if you become a Christian, you decide to follow Christ, you immediately grab onto grace, and I certainly understand why. The forgiveness of God found in the cross, it's liberating, it's freeing. But with that, we fail to recognize that responsibilities and expectations come with it. They're not the first step. It's not as if you have to say, well, if I forgive, God will forgive me. That's not what's going on here. But if you have really received God's forgiveness, then it will have a transformative effect on your heart. It is the natural and expected course. And if it isn't happening for you, then this is a call to ask why. What's going on? What's wrong? What block happened in my heart? Why have I not understood forgiveness? Have I not really seen the massive scope of my debt to God? Have I not really been able to experience? Why am I still lining up all of my buts, all of my excuses? Why am I still doing that? This is meant to teach us that there are expectations on Christ followers, tests of authenticity, of a genuine conversion, of responsibilities and behavioral changes. There are expectations for behavioral changes. And this is one of them. To forgive deeply, genuinely, from the heart. So you might say that granting forgiveness then for each one of us is the inevitable consequence of receiving forgiveness. It's the inevitable consequence. And I think we get that in verse 33. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? Just as I had on you. It is the expected result. So for each of us, we can begin the work of cultivating pity in our hearts, to entering into the pain of others around us, not skirting past their misery, but allowing their misery to begin to impact us so that we feel, so that we are seized by compassion. Because it's only through compassion that we will be able to let go of the wrongs done to us. I think one of the great keys to forgiveness is to simply stop focusing so much on what others have done to us and focus instead on what Jesus has done for us. A shift in the way we view these kinds of things. And I think we can help each other in this. As a community, I think we ought to. We're meant to. And I love the security servant. I love the outrage. The security servant knew the heart of the master, was there enough to experience how the master viewed these things and what he would normally do in situations like this. And so the security servant knew that this isn't the way it ought to be, that there ought to be mercy and grace and forgiveness that's slowly freeing into the lives of other people. And so we can help, we can hold each other accountable as a spiritual family toward this end. And it allow us in our own way to fight for justice and for mercy and to hold each other accountable to show forgiveness. So for you, who do you need to forgive? Even as we began talking about it, names started coming to you. The people that have done these things wrong, the ones that you've said, you know what, I'm fine with them as long as I never see him again. That isn't real forgiveness now, is it? There is no reconciliation. There is no restoration. There is no freeing them from their debt and misery. Who in your life do you need to enter into their pain a little bit? Try to experience it and understand it in such a way that compassion can grip you so that you will do the unthinkable. Because I know how difficult it is. I know how challenging. I know what we're asking is so far beyond what we could ever hope to do apart from the power of the Spirit using the mercy of Christ to flow out of us. See, there are people in your life every day. You know, it could be your spouse. They've been doing all these stupid things. They've made some big mistakes in the past. You know they're going to make some stupid decisions in the future as well. They're maybe in the middle of making some very dumb ones. Maybe it's your kids. You're frustrated. They're back and forth. You're arguing. You're fighting. It's all of this. Maybe you're just working with your crazy family or your past. How often we've been hurt in years gone by. And we're still clinging to these things. And what we're really doing is we're choking them and saying, I will not let this go. I refuse. When you feel that, when you see that, when you sense that in your heart, what's your next step for that? Maybe you just need to wrestle a little bit more fully and completely with your own forgiveness. Maybe it's time to make a phone call or to write a letter. Maybe it's time to take that next step so that they know that you have seen their misery, that you have felt it, and that because of the love of Christ for you, that you're letting it go. This is the hope of the Christian life, to do what is impossible for us through the power of God. Would you pray with me? Lord, I'm asking that you would teach each one of us, show us, even now, who it is, who they are, that desperately need forgiveness from us. Mercy and compassion that flows from a place of wrestling with the misery that we see around us. A softening of our own hearts so that we might take the challenge of this parable seriously. We take it to heart and we live it out through the power of God working itself out in us. We ask for that and so much more. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.